This is the story of the greatest table tennis player you've probably never heard of. A man who won 5 World Championship singles titles, collected more than 22 World Championship gold medals, a number that still appears in the Guinness World Records, and invented a single stroke so far ahead of its time that players are still using it to win world titles today. Right now, as you watch Ma Long, Fan Zhendong, or Tomokazu Harimoto snap a banana flip past a helpless opponent, that stroke traces directly back to one man. His name was Viktor Barna, and in the 1930s, he didn't just dominate table tennis, he redefined what the game could be. Before Barna, table tennis was a polite, defensive sport built on long, patient rallies, with players pushing the ball back and forth and waiting for the other man to blink. Barna walked into that world with a weapon nobody had ever seen, a wrist-snap backhand flick that turned defense into attack in a single motion. Opponents called it unreadable. Journalists called it magic. Today, coaches just call it fundamental. Between 1930 and 1935, that stroke carried him to 5 world singles titles, 4 of them in a row. Then at the absolute peak of his powers, a car crash shattered his playing arm and ended his singles career overnight. This is how Viktor Barna rose, how he won, and why the sport never forgot him. Viktor Barna was born Győző Braun in Budapest in 1911, the son of a printer. Hungary in the 1920s was the undisputed capital of world table tennis, the sport's first superpower, and Barna grew up inside that machine, learning the game at his local sports club with a cheap bat and an obsession that bordered on religious. He wasn't the biggest player, and he wasn't the strongest. What he had was timing and a willingness to practice one stroke 10,000 times until it became invisible to read and impossible to return. By 17, he was on the Hungarian national team. In 1929, he helped Hungary lift the Swaithling Cup, the World Team Championship, the trophy donated by Lady Swaithling, mother of ITTF founder Ivor Montagu, the man who did more than anyone to build the international game. And the table tennis world got its first look at the kid from Budapest with the strange, whipping backhand. 1 year later in Berlin, 1930, Barna won his first World Championship singles title. He was 18 years old, but here's what makes his story remarkable. That first title wasn't the arrival of a Finnish champion. It was the opening move of a player who was still building something, a complete attacking system in a sport that didn't believe in attack. In 1931, his countryman and doubles partner Miklos Sabados took the crown from him. For most players, that's the whole story, a brilliant peak followed by the slow slide into someone else's era. Barna had other plans. Losing the title to his best friend didn't break him, it sharpened him. What came next was one of the most dominant runs any athlete has ever put together in any sport. 4 straight world singles titles, and nobody, not Sabados, not anyone, would take the crown from him again. Only fate could do that. Prague, 1932. Barna faces Sabados, his friend, his doubles partner, the man who took his title, in the world final. This time, Barna doesn't blink. He wins and the crown comes home. Baden, 1933, and he beats Czechoslovakia's Stanislav Kolář in the final. Paris, 1934, he takes down fellow Hungarian Laszlo Belak. London, 1935, it's Sabados again, one last time, and Barna closes out his 4th consecutive world singles title, his 5th overall. 5 world singles championships, 4 in a row. Let that sink in, because in nearly a century of world championships since, no man has ever matched it, and the singles titles were only part of it. Through those same years, Barna was stacking men's doubles titles, 8 of them, most alongside Sabados, alongside the great Maria Mednyansky, the era's dominant female player. He also collected mixed doubles crowns, their partnership one of the most celebrated in the sport's early history, plus Swaithling Cup team goals with Hungary's legendary squad. By the time it was over, he'd collected more than 22 World Championship gold medals and over 30 medals in total. That record has never been equaled, and it likely never will be. But dominance on a scoreboard only tells you what happened. It doesn't tell you why. The other Hungarians trained just as hard. The Czechs, the Austrians, the English, They all studied him, copied him, and built entire game plans around stopping him. For half a decade, none of it worked. The answer wasn't fitness, and it wasn't luck. The answer was that Viktor Barna was playing a different sport than everyone else, one he had essentially invented himself. And it all came down to one stroke. To understand what Barna did to table tennis, you have to understand what the game looked like before him. This was the hard bat era. There was no sponge, and there were no modern spin rubbers, just wood and a thin sheet of pimpled rubber. The ball came off the bat slow and flat, which meant defense usually beat offense. The smart play was to chop, push, and wait. World finals could grind on for hours. The sport rewarded patience, not aggression. Barna's answer was the backhand flick. Here's how it worked. Where other players took the ball late and pushed it back safely, Barna stepped in and took it early, sometimes from positions well behind the table, where attack was supposed to be impossible. At the last instant, with almost no backswing, he snapped his wrist and whipped the ball flat and fast into the corners. There was no windup and no warning. The stroke looked identical to a defensive push right up until the moment it wasn't. That's what made it unreadable. Opponents weren't reacting to the ball because by the time they saw it, the point was already over. But the flick was only the headline. Underneath it was a complete attacking philosophy decades ahead of its time. Take the ball early, use the wrist instead of the arm. Prioritize placement and deception over raw power, and turn your opponent's safest shot into your biggest opportunity. Barna paired it with phenomenal footwork and a temperament that never cracked, flamboyant and showy in exhibitions, ice cold in finals. And the practice ethic underneath it all was brutal in its simplicity. One stroke, repeated thousands upon thousands of times until it required no thought at all. If that sounds familiar, it should. The modern backhand banana flip, also called the Chiquita flick by coaches and commentators today, the stroke every elite attacker on the planet uses to attack short serves, is the direct descendant of what Barna was doing in 1932. Petr Korabel of Czechoslovakia is often credited with bringing the stroke into the modern era, but the lineage runs straight back to Budapest. And nearly a century later, players like Ma Long and Fan Zhendong are still winning world titles with his idea. 1935. Barna is 23 years old, a five-time world champion, and the most famous table tennis player on earth. Then, in an instant, it's gone. A car crash leaves his right arm, his playing arm, shattered. The wrist that produced the most feared stroke in the sport would never be the same. Doctors weren't sure he'd play again at all. His singles reign was over, not because anyone beat him, but because no one ever got the chance. Most champion stories end there. Barna's didn't. He rebuilt his game around what the arm could still do, and in 1939, 4 years after the crash, he stood on top of a world championship podium once again, winning doubles gold. He couldn't be the best singles player in the world anymore. So he became something arguably harder, a champion twice, in two different bodies. When war swallowed Europe, Barna, a Jewish athlete from Budapest, left the continent, eventually settling in England and taking British nationality. And here's where his legacy outgrows his medal count. In England, he went on to win the English Open Championships 20 times, a domestic record that underlines just how far his brilliance stretched beyond the world stage. He worked for Dunlop Sports, helping develop the equipment that would define the next generation of the game. For decades, he barnstormed the world playing exhibitions, putting table tennis in front of millions who had never seen it played at that level. He helped found the Swaithling Club International, the fellowship of world championship players that still connects the sport's elite across generations. England's top player of the year still receives an award that bears his name. When he died in 1972, the record stood: 5 world singles titles, more than 22 world golds, and more world championship medals than any man in the sport's history. It still stands today. But records aren't really the legacy. The legacy is this: every time a player steps around the table, snaps a wrist, and flicks a winner past a frozen opponent, every banana flip, every Chiquita, every backhand attack on a short ball, that's Viktor Barna's hand on the bat. He didn't just win the game, he wrote its future.